Welcome to another exciting episode of Brand Chops, where we're chopping up brands and branding to see what it's made of. My name is Zack Lemear. Yeah, Snoop Dogg and the Olympics. There's been a lot of interesting things going on with the Olympics. We'll stay away from the more risque things, but Snoop Dogg and Flavor Flav were part of the Olympics. Snoop Dogg especially. And I think that it's funny that someone who started off with Murder is the Case, Gin and Juice, known more for smoking huge blunt weed things than anything else. And also the longevity of his brand, right? Where most other, I mean, he's produced a lot of garbage after his time with Dr. Dre, in my opinion, but he stayed on the top of mind of culture. And there's nothing that Snoop Dogg has not associated his brand with. You know, he's got marijuana, he's got tons of different weird advertisements out there. He did a partnership with Martha Stewart, which was the weirdest thing. And then now he's doing all these things in the Olympics. I mean, I saw him try to race Michael Phelps, just as like, and I don't know what the strategy here is. It's probably trying to get people our age that grew up with Snoop Dogg music to be more involved with this, with the Olympics, and just to get more viewership. But he must have gotten paid a ton of money to do all this stuff. He was narrating badminton, and you know what else? He's even licensed his voice to GPS. Imagine driving down GPS and it's Snoop Dogg talking to you. It can happen. You could do it with all kinds of things. There's nothing he has not figured out. He's a very smart business person for a guy that smokes so much weed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see, sort of like you were mentioning before, like the brand expansion that he's been able to do. He started off in those, more risque things that would not fly now. If he were doing some of those things now, they wouldn't fly. But he's been able to sort of reposition himself to be able to be accepted for all these other areas of life that maybe he wouldn't normally have been involved with back then. And I just think it's interesting. It's just a really good use case when it comes to branding and the importance of it and the ability to reposition yourself, to be able to look at different target markets, to be able to find your niche and to kind of work with that. I mean, you mentioned the Martha Stewart thing. Like, it doesn't make sense, but it does in some ways. It's definitely just a weird mixture of
It's
those
because she
two. But
went to
I think
prison, I think. That's where their alignment is.
maybe, yeah, it could be. Maybe they have stories they can tell each other. But I just think um, it's an interesting combination. I think it lends itself well to business in general, like being able to find new avenues to get your brand out there. So for me, it's encouraging brands to think differently about themselves. Like, how can they put themselves in other situations where they can be useful? I mean, another really good example of somebody that does a great job of rebranding themselves or positioning themselves differently is Shaq. Shaq is involved with everything. Like, he is in pizza, insurance, medicated pads for your back. Like, he's got it all at this point too.
Everything.
And he started out. I mean, he from the beginning, he's a little bit different than Snoop, because from the beginning he was everywhere too. Like, he was great. He had the video games. He had the um, movies, all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Shaq was great. And Shaq was actually not my favorite player in Shaq Fu, actually, but that's a different story. But like, just being able to position yourself in different ways just showcases sort of something that all brands can aspire to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a lesson here too in just the evolution of a brand, because if you think about how Snoop started off, he started off as Snoop Doggy Dog, right? That was his whole thing. They had a whole song about it to help you remember the name, just like they did for Eminem, and it's very strategic why they do that. But then he went to Snoop Dogg, and then there was a period of time where he was going to change it to Snoop Lion. Do you remember that? Because the lion was more, it's bigger than a dog. And but the thing is, it's like, I don't know, like 2 months ago, I just saw Snoop Dogg on the roast of Tom Brady, and he was the most disgusting, and talking about weed and sex and F this and F that. And then 2 seconds later, he's now sponsoring the Olympics somehow. He's basically the Olympic mascot. And and that's the thing. It's like, over time, when in the beginning he was Snoop Dogg and he was a gangster rapper and his whole persona was built about not giving an F and I'll go to jail. and I don't care about and I don't care about that and drugs and this and guns and Long Beach and Warren G. And then he just over time he just kept evolving and evolving, and he's been everywhere. He was in something about there was a PlayStation 2 game back in the day. It was something about New York, and I can't remember it, but you would go through, and he was a licensed character in there, and you could actually fist fight people in the street as Snoop Dogg, right? Like, and it was just there's nothing he has not. He's got lighters with like I know he's got an advertisement right now with just a it's like a Bic lighter that's just slightly long, and then it's also got Martha Stewart in it. So she's like lighting candles with it. And she goes, Snoop, what other things can you use this extra long lighter for? And it's, like, so this is like months ago. So he's still very much true to his brand, smoking weed and all that stuff, right? Like he's got this Cheech and Chong vibe where he just can't get rid of it. Plus, honestly, marijuana has become such a minimal thing in culture and society. It's so legal everywhere, and it's medicinal, and it's just like I don't think it's as big of a hullabaloo as it used to be, even though the laws still classify it as such. But there's a lot of lessons here to talk about the evolution of a brand. Snoop Doggy Dogg to Snoop Dogg to Snoop. And then you'll notice, because as you're developing a brand and creating a brand, you got to make sure that it's tight, because as human beings, we're going to shorten it no matter what. And if you've noticed this, how a nickname develops or how someone's, long name will be truncated somehow, it's because we are trying to spend less mental calories. So now it's just Snoop, which also is a protected name of another dog, Snoopy. I don't know how that even came to be and how he didn't get in trouble for it, but for some reason he differentiated so well that you never ever ever think of Snoopy the dog and Snoop Dogg, even though it's the same word. That's great differentiation.
No, I think he's done a great job with his brand, and I think it's just something that businesses should look at when they're identifying. And I feel like his brand should be like a case study in Harvard Law or something like that, or marketing schools and things like that. Because I just think it's a really good. He just does a really great job of positioning himself in all these different places and just being himself, right? I think that's part of it too. He's genuine. He's authentic. He's giving interviews in his typical Snoop fashion at the Olympics, and it's endearing and it's entertaining and it's him. He's not trying to sugarcoat. He's not trying to be something he's not, and he's just so developed over time. And it just shows that authenticity always wins when you're talking, when you're using, when you're out there talking about your business. It's really important.
Yeah, and that's the appeal too. You know who Snoop Dogg is. You know what he represents. You know what he's about. Many of us grew up with Snoop Dogg, and that's the reason why I watched it. And that's the reason why I was like, why the hell is Snoop Dogg in the Olympics racing Michael Phelps in a pool? And it was even more hilarious to watch him take his shirt off next to Michael Phelps, and he's just like scrawny, like unfit. Like, how are you? And like, I was expecting him to drown, like just because I'm sure he doesn't have the greatest lung capacity, but he did make a comment in the Olympics about his lung capacity, which was referring to his marijuana usage. So this is the thing. He's super authentic, but he can refine it. And as he's getting older, like this just happened in the Super Bowl. They brought back Snoop and Dre and Eminem. I don't know, it was a couple Super Bowls ago, but they brought them all back. And these people used to be the ones that were banned from TV. You can't say anything. You can't. Gangster rap was one of the reasons why we have parental advisory stickers, because it was so raunchy, especially like the original stuff. I know because as a 12-year-old, I was listening to it and I shouldn't have been, but I memorized every lyric because it was so bad. I was like, oh, I shouldn't be listening to this. I'm going to remember it forever. But it's just interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, so I guess the moral of the story is if you're a small business and you're looking for ways to differentiate yourself in the market, you should really do that and use people like Snoop and Shaq and those other Flavor Flav. Being able to reinvent yourself, I think, is still trying to be still maintaining your brand, but reinventing who you are and getting yourself out there into different markets in front of different people. I think is a good way to help expand your brand.
Yeah, and another good example too, if you think about it, is the juxtaposition or the difference side by side of a Snoop Dogg and a Flavor Flav. Okay, Flavor Flav was part of Run DMC, I think, or no, Public Enemy. Public Enemy. He was the original hype man, Flavor Flav, and then he was silent for a long time until he had like some VH1 show where he was like in some real world house, and then he was shacking up with people in there, and then he was just getting a lot of stuff. But then he went out again. But the difference between him and Snoop is that Snoop has stayed in the public eye the entire time. He's featuring on all these songs. He's doing shows. He's constantly staying relevant, and he's lasted for years, decades. And I don't even know. I was shocked to see Flavor Flav, but I wasn't shocked to see Snoop Dogg because Flavor Flav doesn't really make any sense. Like he wasn't wearing his clock. I don't even know what he was doing there. I guess it was just there to, it was like the train wreck effect, you know, it got the attention. It kept your eyeballs on the screen, even if it wasn't, even if it didn't make sense. And even if it didn't add a ton of value, the strategy was to get your attention and keep your attention. And look at what's happening. We're talking about it right now. And what do we say all the time? Marketing is not about talking about yourself. It's about getting other people to talk about you. And now we're just helping proliferate Snoop Dogg's brand. You know,
It's interesting.
It's just very.
It's interesting you mentioned the Flavor Flav and the clock. I mean, again, that's branding 101, right? Having that differentiating thing that he takes from one thing to the next and stays consistent. And everyone knows him for that clock. And you're not the only one that said something about him not having it. That's interesting, too. I wonder if he's trying to distance himself from that brand in some way. And that's one way to do that. So I guess we'll see what else is in store for Flavor Flav. But
yeah, no, but that's a good point. The brand attributes that we were talking about in a previous episode. But, you know, I was also thinking when I first saw Flavor Flav, like, how old is this guy right now? Like 60, 65? He's old, right? Too old to be acting that way. So to me, Flavor Flav was a persona that he created when he was young. You're almost trapped in this persona. Like George Costanza couldn't really get any more jobs because people couldn't see him as anything besides George. He got typecast for that. But I was like, it gave me a little bit of an ick feeling to watch a 60-year-old or a 55-year-old man act like a 20-year-old because that's how we remember him. And there is no other version. Like he was not allowed to evolve as a human being, at least in the public eye. So now they're hiring him to be a caricature of himself, which is in a little bit of a way, a little bit disrespectful. But, you know, if you're going to sell out, I guess, you know, Flavor Flav probably needed the money because it's been a while since he was on that show where he was, I forget what show it was, but I remember he was with that big German lady that was in Rocky.
Flavor of Love.
Flavor of Love. Oh, it was about him? Flavor of Love? Really?
No, that's one of them.
I don't watch that kind of stuff.
That was the one where he was like the person that everyone was trying to date.
That's why he was hooking up with everybody. Okay, that makes sense now.
So
all right, pardon my ignorance, audience. I didn't get a lot of Flavor of Love in my youth. But yeah, so like Chris said, you know, the lesson learned is stand out, differentiate, stay authentic. So tune in next week when we chop up brands to see what they're made of.
See you guys.
Brand Chops is brought to you by the fine people at Pivot Creative. Pivot Creative is a full-service branding and marketing agency that partners with businesses to build brands that connect so that every dollar you spend is an investment and not an expense. If you need some branding or marketing guidance, a website, a new brand, or want to learn more about one of the topics we cover on the show, please reach out to us at pivotcreative.com. If you know someone that would benefit from learning more from one of our shows, please share the episode. Visit brand-chops.com. And as always, like and subscribe if you find this content to be helpful. See you next time on Brand Chops, where we chop up brands to see what they're made of.